Hi, everybody. My name is Kiersten Kelley, and welcome to the Problem with Authority podcast. Here on this podcast, we will be talking about all things problem with authority, systems, professions, social work, and the mental health field as a whole. And this podcast is really important to me because in order to make change, you have to name the problems. And once you name problems, you can then start to have the conversations and do the research about how we need to change. And change can involve tearing down or rebuilding. But before we get into the fun episodes, I wanted to do this intro for you guys to learn a little bit more about myself, my why, and really how I became to be in social work. And social work is not going to be the main focus of this podcast, but it is a big part of who I am and where I am today. So to begin, I am a Master's of Social Work student at Florida State University. I have a Bachelor's of Social Work from FSU as well with a certificate in child welfare. And I just completed my first semester at FSU, which was a struggle because it was over Zoom because of COVID. But we persevered, and I have 2 semesters left before I am officially a MSW graduate. I initially did not think of social work to be my chosen career, but in high school, I definitely still held the same values of helping others and having a serious problem with the systems and authority figures around me that abuse their power. And I was a really angry kid, and I struggled with a lot of anxiety, which really messed up my relationship with learning. I held grades to a really high standard, and I also attached my value to grades. So if I wasn't getting A's, I wasn't a good person, basically, in my head. So that was really hard because of my testing anxiety. I wasn't able to get the grades that I thought that I deserved because I did work really hard. And with that, I couldn't take the SAT or ACT. I don't know what you need to fail those tests, but I honestly had the lowest scores possible. And I did not get into FSU when I first applied. And that was very hard for me to handle and grasp because it was my dream to go there. I didn't think that I was going to have a problem because my grades were right where they needed to be, but that ACT and SAT score was way too low. So I had a mental breakdown. Then I regrouped and I applied to Tallahassee Community College, TCC, which is a community college in the Tallahassee area, which is it's right next to Florida State. And I ended up getting my AA, and it was one of the best things I ever did because a lot of you who are in college or those of you who are applying to college will soon find out that college is a lot of BS, and they make you take a lot of classes that you really don't need. And it's getting to the point where, students can't pay off their student loans. And a lot of the time the people within the colleges don't understand that you're paying for an education and not all the time are you treated as such. And essentially you are a client of the university, and not all the time are you given the resources or help or guidance that, you're really paying for. And with that comes with going into extra credit hours and taking classes that you don't really need that the university pushes on you. And I'm basing these stories off of information that other students have told me and I've seen students go through personally. And so with going to TCC, I didn't really have to navigate those problems that a lot of students have if they go to a university for 4 years. TCC was very forgiving. The classes were easier. They were smaller. They gave me money, which was great. Community colleges are actually pretty great at giving students scholarships. And I was able to take that year and really focus on what I wanted to do. And when I was sitting in one of my advising meetings, they were like, okay, Kiersten, what's your thing? What do you like to do? And I was like, I really like helping people. I I want to do therapy. And every time I would tell somebody that, they'd be like, you need to be a psychologist. And no offense to psychologists, but I hate psychology. I hated the classes and I hated the work, and I just didn't like it. It didn't appeal to me. So I was directed to social work, and they were like, you will love this. And at the time, the only thing I knew about social work was that they work for DCF. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But they were like, no, it's much more than that. So I applied to the BSW program and I got in, and I think that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And I'm really thankful that I honestly didn't get into Florida State, and I was able to save a lot of money going to TCC, and I was able to really just find myself and ground myself and honestly humble myself and detach my value that I held grades to and fall in love with learning again. So the social work program at Florida State is really awesome in many ways, has some issues in other ways, but what education system doesn't? I loved the fact that I was able to express myself and demonstrate the knowledge that I know through writing. So it's a paper heavy major. We really do not take tests or quizzes. It does happen occasionally, but that's not the main source of your grade, which I loved because I can sit there and be detail oriented, do the research, and write papers. I can connect the dots and really state and argue my case in words. I cannot sit there and take a test and be subject to the tricking that a lot of times professors try to do, and the multiple choice, the confusing wording in the paragraph questions. That's not my thing. And I don't think that that's really how it works in the real world either. So that's why I love papers, because you can really just demonstrate your knowledge in a more roundabout way. So the BSW was amazing. I was falling in love with learning again. I was surrounded by people that really just got me, and I was able to connect closely with a lot of my peers because our class sizes were super small. Now, at this point in time, I really didn't have an opinion about a lot of things that had to do with social work because I was taking it all in. I was learning the history of the profession, all the different careers that you can have within social work, all the quote unquote great things that social work does. And a lot of us who were together in the BSW program that continued on to the MSW program sat down and had a conversation one time and was like, at the BSW level, they really just try and sell you. They really just try to sell you on social work. And I think that's because a lot of the time the social work profession feels inferior, honestly. And they want to stop a lot of stigma that surrounds the profession. But in doing that and focusing on that, they fail to really tackle and target the problems and narratives that they need to be driving within the profession. So that was something that I really have learned this semester. A lot of the times we just repeat things that we're told and we don't really ask questions. And that's why I love the title again, Problem with Authority, because it really encompasses what we all need to be doing. We should all have a problem with authority. We should all have a problem with the way that things are run and what we see on the media and what we see politicians doing or not doing. And it really opened my eyes this semester that the social work profession has a lot to do, and I have a lot of inner work to do. And any baby social workers listening, which I'm still a baby social worker, so I'm right there with you. The key to social work and starting in this profession is the inner work. And it's learning about your bias, your prejudice. It's learning about the true history of this profession, which is rooted in white supremacy. And we will be doing a whole episode on that and how we need to move forward from those harmful narratives. But in order to do that, again, it's that inner work. It's really diving deep and and tapping into the way you were raised, your beliefs, and why you believe those things, listening to the people around you and their lived experiences and unique perspectives. Because if you are in social work, and a lot of professors won't say this, but I'm going to say it, you cannot be homophobic, racist, any of that. You can't. You just can't. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I can compartmentalize. You cannot. Your bias will always jump out. If you have hatred or discomfort with something, it will jump out either in your face, either subconsciously in how you treat people. And that goes for treating them in a relationship stance, like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Like, you might be a little more aggressive, but also in the sense of treating them, like diagnosing them, medication, type of therapy you use, it all plays into that. So you cannot compartmentalize. Don't let anybody tell you that, because that's not true. So if you are uncomfortable with something, you need to work through it. You need to be reading the books, you need to be meditating, whatever it is you do to come to a point where you can really just accept others for who they are. And that is not always easy, especially with the type of BS that we're taught a lot of the time in religion, a lot of the time in our education system, how the world is really viewed and talked through a white lens, and that erases a lot of other people's experiences or the true origin of things or the true, honestly, meaning of things. And that's just the tip of the day for any baby social workers listening. It is a lot of work emotionally with, vicarious trauma that you might experience with your clients, but a lot of it is the inner work and knowing how to, deal with that trauma, but also dealing with the harmful narratives that you might be perpetuating. So let me get off my soapbox really quick. Didn't mean to go on that rant, but it's true. And part of being a social worker is knowing when it's your turn to talk and when it's your turn to listen. And that's why I'm so excited to have so many different professionals on this podcast to bring different unique perspectives. And it's not only going to be professionals, people, whether they have a degree or not, just coming on and talking about their perspectives, or if they feel like sharing their lived experiences, so that we can all start to get used to listening to others more than we speak to them. So before we end, I want to talk a little bit about where I'm at right now in social work and where I want to be. And then that'll be it for our intro episode. So I really do want to get my license. I want to become an LCSW, and that is solely for the purpose of getting more money. And I haven't decided if that's morally corrupt or not, but the licensure is definitely a gatekeeper to the profession. And just because you have an LCSW does not mean that you are better than any other clinician. It doesn't make you a better clinician. It really just means that you sat there, you took the test, and you paid for the hours, and you had somebody supervise you. So I'm still deciding if that's something I really want to do, if it's morally okay for me to do that just for the money. But I'm still working on that one. But let's normalize learning and educating ourselves and then changing our minds later on. But anyway, I do eventually want to work in a private setting on a sliding scale. I just think for my personality, that would work best. I definitely need a lot of time off. I don't believe in the idea that we are all supposed to overwork ourselves and not have a home life and work, and then we die. That's not the type of life I want to live, and I feel like private practice will give me a little bit more freedom. And I'm not sure, the quote-unquote population I want to work with, and I really don't believe in baby social workers trying to focus too hard on the type of population they want to work with, because you can learn from everybody. And you shouldn't be discouraged if you don't get that placement you really wanted, or you're not working with the type of people you wanted, whether that be you really wanted to work with kids and you're working with adults. You can learn from everybody, and it will come. Where you need to be and where you need to be working will come, so don't stress it. But right now, I do love working with kids. They're just so fun, and I get to be a kid when I'm working with them. And currently, I work at a nonprofit within the College of Social Work at Florida State University. And I'm beginning to feel, a little bit of the effects of vicarious trauma that I talked about before. And for those of you that don't know, it's trauma that you take on by working with people who explain really their trauma narratives to you, or their, just lived experiences in general that might be stressful to you as the person listening. And I think it hits different when you're talking with kids, just because you feel for them and you just want them to be okay. And a lot of the time in social work, you're working in situations where there's abuse going on, there's depression, there's suicide, and these are really serious things that are happening. And it can keep you up at night worrying about the kid that told you about their abuse. And then law says you are a mandated reporter. So then that means that, you have to navigate how to work that out with the kid to make sure that they still trust you, but understand that this is the decision that you have to make. And it's a lot. And I think another thing that we're not told enough is that ethical dilemmas are going to come up way more than you would ever expect. And having a community behind you of social workers that get it, I think is really important, because I'm definitely starting to feel those effects. And if so far I have been able to do my self-care and have the support and I've been okay, but if that continues, I might have to change direction. But it can be really disheartening, and I'm not going to lie about that. So right now, where I'm at with the social work profession, mental health field, all the systems we work with, criminal justice, the, juvenile justice, the medical, we work and partner with so many different people around us. It can be extremely overwhelming, because not always do I believe in how those systems operate. And not always do I believe that what we're doing within social work is right. So I'm definitely a sponge for knowledge right now. I'm taking in everything that I can, reading everything that I can, but also struggling internally with a lot. And I think this podcast will be a great way for me to be vulnerable about that and navigate the different avenues of social work and systems that overlap, and how I feel about them, and learning more about them, and talking with other people about how they operate, so that we can all form opinions, and then we can begin to advocate for change. So that's really where I'm at. I'm a big advocate for bridging micro and macro social work. Anybody who knows me knows that. I believe that if you are a micro social worker, you need to know what's going on at the macro level. And that involves working within a grassroots organization, using social media as a platform to reach many people. And for those of you that don't know, I do have a social work page. It's at Kiersten_Kelley, where over there I began to use the knowledge that I have obtained in the past few years from, my personal experiences and social work to really advocate and use that platform for something good. The reason why I started doing that, and honestly even thought of doing a podcast, was because of COVID and BLM. Social work is political, and I do believe that we should be taking serious political stances for or against certain things, and using social media has been a great way to reach so many different people and talk about these important topics. And how we've done that over there is we have a series called Social Hour with a Social Worker that we talk about things like harm reduction, race and social work, self-care, self-love, and it's really social work specific. But on this podcast, I wanted to open it up to many other professionals and people that enjoy learning or talking about the topics that we're going to dive into. So that is all for today. Thank you to everyone who is listening, and tune in next time as we are going to talk about the problems with the church and social work.